The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
You're now about to witness the truth.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is today.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with
thank
listener support.
Thank you, announcer. I appreciate the enthusiasm. It is today, Monday, Memorial Day, 2016, May 30th. You know what? I am a horrible brother. Just realized today's my sister's birthday. Didn't just realize, but I realized I hadn't called her yet. So at the top of the show, to my beautiful sister, you know which one you are. Happy birthday. I'm going to call you before midnight. Guaranteed. I'm going to give you a call before midnight. But thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining me for the Benjamin Dixon Show on this Memorial Day. A lot to cover. I wasn't going to do a show today because it's a holiday, and then, you know, I can always take a chance to get a little rest. But I'm going to be broadcasting from Florida for the rest of the week. So I figured I'd get some usage out of this wonderful studio one last time for this week. So we still will have broadcasts, et cetera, et cetera. But that's why I came in. That's why I'm here. Plenty to talk about. I stumbled onto a beautiful, brilliant article this morning about neoliberal multiculturalism. And it's the academic phrase for everything that we've been talking about on this show for so long. So we'll discuss that. I also have to. It is incumbent upon me to talk about Donald Trump. It is a requirement, not from any other source, no external pressures. This is my call. I have to talk about Donald Trump, but more specifically, I have to talk about how political parties will sell their political soul to maintain power. That's what I want to talk about in regards to Donald Trump. And then, of course, Barney Frank over the weekend. Bernie Sanders made the move to have Barney Frank removed from the committee, the Rules Committee, the Platform Committee, and the Team Hillary proceeded to, as expected, to lose their wits. I'm going to try not to cuss so much tonight. Anyway, join the conversation, ladies and gentlemen. 857-600-0518. We'll be talking about this and much more over the next hour, but I definitely want to get your input. I want to see what you have to say, because you guys are definitely a huge contribution to the conversation, and it is only possible with you and your support. So I want to get you guys in on the conversation. 857-600-0518. Okay, let's start with Donald Trump and how he has pwned the Republican Party. What brought this to my attention was watching Marco Rubio on State of the Union with Jake Tapper on yesterday, and seeing Marco Rubio genuflect before Donald Trump and do everything in his power to find himself in the good graces of a Trump Republican Party, despite everything that he said anti-Trump in the primaries. Now, under normal circumstances, this is exactly what you do. You fight a hell of a campaign, which I don't think Marco Rubio did, but he fought. You fight a hell of a campaign, and then once the nominee comes out, you fall in line. This is what politicians have been doing for a very long time. The difference is we're talking about a man who, at his own word, is by far the most insane politician that we've seen in a long time. And we'll talk about the comparisons to Hillary Clinton in a minute, but just on Donald Trump's own words, Donald Trump is a sociopath now in charge of one of our two major political parties. And that's part of the problem right there, is that we only have two major political parties, but we'll talk about that in a second. But it's still at the fundamental core of the conversation. Donald J. Trump is the leader of the Republican Party now. And we saw the party itself and the chairman, Reince Priebus, we saw him shift gears right towards the end of, I forgot was the last state before they declared that he was going to be the presumptive nominee. But you saw the party, the infrastructure, the GOP, the people in power right now who want to maintain power. You saw them line up right away. The problem is with Reince Priebus, whatever you call him, Priebus and Marco Rubio and all the rest of them, is that they have decided to fall in line with somebody who is decidedly a white nationalist, because even if he himself is not a devout white nationalist are in good graces with Donald Trump. You know, it's like that cartoon from Fox News, from The Simpsons, where it says, Fox News, not racist, but #1 with racists. And so I don't care how you cut it. Donald Trump may just be playing a character on TV, which I genuinely think he is. I think he's just playing a character. But the character he has chosen to play makes him #1 with racists, makes him #1 with the very worst and the dredges of our society. They've come out in full support of Donald Trump. This is nothing new. And the reason I always say, and I'll still say it now, Donald Trump doesn't scare me. This is not a scare tactic, but it's just the realization that the political parties have no central identity to which they are committed, that they will not overturn or completely dismiss for the purposes of maintaining political power. And this goes both ways with the Democratic Party as well as the Republican Party. People tend to think that their party is, they line up on the side of their political football team and think only the best of their political parties, and they think that their political parties represents the best of America, and then the opposition represents the worst of America. That's generally what people think when it comes down to political parties. The problem is they don't realize that their party itself has no ideology to which it is fundamentally committed. We have seen throughout American history where political parties have shifted. They've shifted their ideologies. They've shifted what they stood for. There has been a realignment in the past, and I kind of think that we're going through a realignment now. But the point is, it is amazing to see people who call themselves having principled dissent against and opposition towards Donald Trump all falling in line, one after the other, like good Republicans, behind a maniac. I can't really say that I'm surprised, simply because that is what political parties do. That's what people who are more concerned with political power than they are their own central guiding morality or ideology or whatever the hell you want to call it. People who are more focused on maintaining and obtaining power are willing to lay down what they believe in exchange to be in the good graces of a political party. And what's fascinating is that you wouldn't know whether I was talking about the Democratic Party or the Republican Party if I didn't preface what I just said to be about Donald Trump, because both political parties do this. We see this with the Democratic Party, particularly with the DLC, the Democratic Leadership Council. We saw how they took over the party economically by being the fundraising powerhouse of the Democratic Party. And then we saw the party itself fall right in line with ideologies that are contrary to the fundamental principles that built the Democratic Party. And so this idea that your political team is the winner and they're the best ones and everybody else is just disillusioned or they're crazy or whatever you want to call it, the fact of the matter is you're just one insane politician away, or you're just one opportunistic, sociopathic politician away from aligning with a political party that will line up with someone who is dangerous for America, someone who's dangerous for our political, our international community, someone who's dangerous for every demographic except for you're just one politician away from being so committed to political power that you're willing to betray your political ideology. And that's what I saw when I saw Marco Rubio just fall in line like a good little boy. So committed. That's what you see with Dick Cheney. One thing Dick Cheney is not going to do is lose political power. I mean, we don't expect much from someone like Dick Cheney. I don't think anyone does. But for him to align with someone as reckless as Donald Trump speaks to the lengths to which people will go to maintain a foot in the door for political power. Now, here's something that about Donald Trump on his side of the equation that I find a little bit surprising, but I guess inevitable. The fact that he is, as much as he's still talking trash about Republicans, he is embracing the RNC. He is embracing the political establishment of the Republican Party. He is in bed with them now. He's counting on them for research. He's counting on them for boots on the ground. He's counting on them for fundraising dollars. So Donald Trump, this outsider that everyone loves, all these people who love Donald Trump because he tells it like it is, and he's the person that is going to stick it to the establishment. Donald Trump is now establishment. Donald Trump is the establishment candidate, and he has the full backing of the establishment, with the exception of a few dissenting voices like the Bush family and Mitt Romney and Bill Kristol, if you want to count him. So this is the fascinating thing. So now it reminds me of times in history when political parties could have been there to be a buffer against a strong man, but instead they aligned with the strong man for the purposes of maintaining political power. And the moral of the story, ladies and gentlemen, is simply this: do not put your faith in a political party, period. That's the moral of the story. Because if you put your faith in a political party and not your own set of guiding principles, then you'll find yourself running behind whoever is at the top of your political party and find yourself justifying everything that they do because it's done in the name of your political party. Instead of being a principled dissenter who says, I cannot align with what this person who is representing my party says, does, or is going to do. And so for a fleeting moment there, I was proud of the Republican Party because they were doing everything they could to stop Donald Trump. But now they have completely acquiesced to his demands. They are completely rolling over for him, and they are essentially all beholden to Donald Trump. Now, this is exactly what they deserve. I can't, as I lament over the fact that a person like Donald Trump is now the head of one of our major parties, you also have to realize this is exactly what the Republican Party deserves. They worked very hard to make an electorate that is conducive to someone like Donald Trump. And this is something I talked about at great lengths over the summer. Over the summer, I was talking about how Donald Trump fell on the Achilles heel of the Republican Party because the Republican Party for 40 years plus has been the dog whistle, race baiting political party. They have used the art of subtle racism. There was one author who was on Bill Moyers who called it strategic racism, from Nixon all the way down to Donald Trump. beginning with Nixon, the dog whistles that were used to galvanize the South, the Southern strategy. They have been building towards this. And it was this unseemly and unlikely coalition between poor white Southerners and rich white Rockefeller Republicans, who generally would not have anything in common. They don't even have their moral, their social conservatism in common, because many of the Rockefeller Republicans are socially moderate at best. Some of them are just downright socially liberal, but they have nothing in common except for the fact that they feel that the Republican Party is this great this great vessel to take America back to some fictional glory days that really, if there was such a thing, it was only a glory day for white people and not for anyone else, for straight white men, Christian men. And this is something that they actually tout. There's a clip that I have of Bill O'Reilly discussing how America is run by white Christian men. And he's saying this to then presidential candidate John McCain as they lament over the changing demographics of America and how the changing demographics change the power structure of America. And they're frustrated because now these changing demographics is taking away the power from white Christian men. And so this unseemly or unlikely coalition between rich Rockefeller-style Republicans who really don't give a damn about any social conservatism because they don't have a socially conservative life, and they don't really hold on to the Christian evangelical side of the Republican Party. However, they understood how useful that demographic was to their voting bloc. They maintained a coalition with Southerners, some rich, some poor. It wasn't always all poor, but Southerners who held on to religious traditional values. And they saw the problem of America being that we were consistently moving away from these golden days where black people knew their place, gays were in the closet, women knew their role was in the kitchen. When you think about Take America Back, you always have to ask the question, take America back where, right? So this is the coalition that has been building in plain sight for the last 40 years. And as we discussed ad nauseum over the summer, Donald Trump is the greatest representation of this unlikely coalition. And that's why nobody could stop him. That's why no matter what they did, no matter what they tried, no one could stop Donald Trump, because he said exactly what the hell they've been saying for years in private. They were just smart enough at the time to never say it publicly. But now we've pushed the envelope of stupidity in America so far that it is completely acceptable to say in public what the hell they've been saying in private all along. And Donald Trump mastered the moment, and now he owns the Republican Party. And the Republican Party, more importantly, owns his reputation, owns his politics, owns his view of the world. They have owned everything that is disgusting about Donald Trump. Now, here's the thing that pisses me off about this more. Here's a golden opportunity for progressives in America to actually crush this movement and put it where it deserves to be. But we're too busy trying to decide if we want to be progressive in the first place. We're too busy trying to elect our own corporatist candidate. We're too busy, trying to redefine progressivism and to use identity politics as a means of suppressing real progressivism. We're too busy in our own fight to even capitalize on this opportunity that Donald Trump has afforded us. Because in what reasonable world would there even be a competition between a candidate who has disapproval ratings in the high 50s and low 60s and a second candidate? Except for the fact that we on our side have a candidate who they're doing everything they possibly can to promote, who has unfavorable ratings almost as low as Donald Trump, or almost as high, depending on how you're interpreting the data. So here's this golden opportunity to expose Republicans and conservatism for what they've been for the longest time. And we can't even capitalize on it because Democrats and people on the left have lost their damn way over those last 40 years as well. 857-600-0518. Yeah. So here we have the quintessential strongman who is capable of saying and doing anything, or at least saying anything he wants. He has taken over the Republican Party, and all dissenting voices are being crushed, not just by his bravado, but also by the political establishment that wants nothing more than to maintain political power. And that is the most important thing out of everything I said. You have to understand that these political parties are here to get and maintain power. And you ask yourself, to what extent are they willing to go to get and maintain power? They're willing to go as far as embracing Donald Trump instead of rejecting Donald Trump. That's where we are. And we're at a time where we can't even leverage it, and we can't even capitalize on it because of our own baggage. And speaking of our own baggage, let's talk about this deal with Barney Frank. I don't know if I should start. Should I start with neoliberal multiculturalism and unpack it from the front, or should I unpack it from the back with Barney Frank? All right. I think I'm just going to start with Barney Frank and then build my way into multicultural neoliberalism, neoliberal multiculturalism, potato. So Barney Frank is, at one time, was considered to be a progressive. He left his position in the House, and he took a job as a banker. He has proven in many ways not to be the progressive that many people thought he was, particularly because he began to work on the opposite side of the equation, where we have been trying to create structures that protected consumers, structures that protected the economy, structures that protected capitalism from itself, quite frankly. And the man who helped build some of those structures is now working on the other side of the fence. That's one. That's a Cliff Note version of it. You can dig into it for yourself. The second part of it is that Barney Frank is quite literally a very partisan, very outspoken, very vocal person who has beef, long-standing animosity with Bernie Sanders. And so this weekend, when Bernie Sanders made the play saying that he felt like Barney Frank should be removed from his position leading into the Democratic National Convention, you would think that people would consider all of the baggage that they have, all of the complicated issues that exist between progressives and Barney Frank, quite frankly, and Bernie Sanders and Barney Frank. You know, they've got history. You would think that people would place this in the context of maybe bad blood that goes back some years, maybe just disagreements on philosophical and ideological terms, that goes back some years. Maybe people would cast this in the conversation about how they may have been on the same side and now they are basically political enemies. You could really cast this as a great falling out of two ostensibly progressive brothers who at one time were fighting on the same side of issues in some ways, and now they are completely at odds. You could have cast this as a great narrative of this 2016 deciding what's really progressive and what's not. Or is there such a thing as progressivism, or is it just a figment? You could have even cast it in that narrative. But instead of doing any substantive, any meaningful, or any probing narratives and investigation, the play this weekend is that Bernie Sanders is now homophobic because he had the nerve to challenge a LGBTQ former statesman. And you have I feel nauseated just having to talk about how willingly people on Hillary Clinton's team are so transparent with their obtuseness, right? They have no qualm whatsoever with putting out the most fatuous positions possible that have no relevance, that have no grounding in actual logic, has completely ridiculous positions to reduce a conversation about two feuding statesmen who have fundamentally different views on how progressivism should be represented in America, and they would rather just play the yellow journalism card of Bernie Sanders is now homophobic. This is the ridiculousness that has become the 2016 election. This is how ridiculous the Democratic Party has become, because this is what we've devolved into. Because it's not possible for you to disagree with someone based on the merits of what they stand for. If you disagree with them and they're a woman, you're automatically a sexist. If you disagree with them and they are an African American, you're automatically a racist. If you disagree with them and they are a LGBTQ, you're automatically homophobic. And this is a continuation and an extension of what they've been building on for a very long time as a means of suppressing progressive movements. They've utilized and weaponized identity politics, where you are completely incapable of challenging someone based on the merits of what they're saying, because they are quickly positioned to feign outrage over some fictionalized offense. This is what the Democratic Party has devolved into, the exact caricature that the Republicans have been pushing on them over the last 8 years. And it's very difficult for people to actually operate on two wavelengths, right? Where you could say the Republican Party were wrong on a lot of things, and they were wrong on most of this conversation about identity, because their party personifies, as evident by Donald Trump and his white nationalism, they personify the racism that many people have complained about. However, that does not mean that in every case the Republican Party was wrong, because we can see it right now, right before our eyes. That's overly simplified use and weaponization. I don't know if it's a word, I just made it up. They've weaponized identity politics as a means of suppressing debate and as a means of suppressing dissent. And the only people who are able to be guilty of this are people who are not properly ordained by the Democratic establishment. Because this is exactly how you have someone like last few weeks, we've been talking about Matt Bruenig and Joan Walsh. You have Matt Bruenig getting fired over saying scumbag Steve meme and applying that to a powerful Democrat, right? And then you have Joan Walsh being able to call people assholes, and not a single thing is done to her, and she is still considered to be the victim here when she is quite literally the oppressor or the victimizer. And so if you are not a part of this ordained club of people from people who are ordained by the Democratic establishment, or, if you're not inside of this club, then you quite literally can never say anything to these people. Yes, these people, those people. You can't say anything to them without automatically being attacked with identity politics. They have weaponized it masterfully. Now, from a purely agnostic political science perspective, brilliant strategy. Kudos. Good job. From a normal human being perspective, go F yourself comes to mind. Because you are using this tactic on the backs of people who have been marginalized, who have been oppressed, who are victims of systemic oppression, not just systemic racism, but systemic economic oppression. And you've used this as a means of silencing the conversation about systemic economic oppression. In other words, you've used black people and the plight of black people to hurt black people. You've used LGBTQ people and you've stood on the backs of LGBTQ people and you've hurt them and you've hurt their cause. You've used women who have been harassed, genuinely harassed, legitimately harassed every single day online for things that are completely insane. You've used that narrative, you've co-opted that narrative, and you've done it to the detriment of people who have been victimized. Because who, quite frankly, is going to take you seriously when you have been crying wolf all the time, and not just crying wolf for the sake of crying wolf? You've been crying wolf for the ends of protecting the economic status quo through which you are the greatest beneficiary, the greatest recipient. The DNC and Democrats are some of the biggest recipients of corporate money. There's two sides of every equation. For every dollar that goes to a Republican, somebody is giving money to a Democrat. And some of that money is going to all of these lobbying firms, is going to all of these research firms, all these political consultants, all of these surrogates, and money is filtering in by the droves. And so they have used marginalized people, and they've co-opted the language of marginalized people to the detriment of marginalized people. And they expect us to just sit back and say, oh, hey, it was a fair fight. And this is exactly what they've done with Barney Frank. Never mind the fact that there's legitimate animosity and history between Bernie Sanders that would suggest that Bernie Sanders probably would ask for him to be removed. Never mind the fact that there are legitimate ideological differences. But I guess who tweeted this? I forgot who tweeted this, but somebody tweeted, and it was brilliant. It was like, I guess because Barney Frank is anti-gun and he's LGBTQ, that he's all around progressive. Never mind his current role and his current position is somewhat undermining to the progressive movement. But so long as we allow them to use this as a weaponized tactic, it is so easy, so very easy to sidestep the real conversation, to quite literally have any progress whatsoever on issues that are important to the people they claim to represent. And that's where we are. That's exactly where we are. And I'm afraid that I don't care who becomes president. I mean, quite frankly, because either way it goes, there going to be things that are still broken or might get broken even worse. There going to be things that have to be fixed, and it's no president, even if it's Bernie Sanders, is going to be or create a panacea. My concern is that electing someone like Trump and someone like Clinton carries a world of problems for marginalized groups. Because on the one hand, you have Donald Trump, who quite literally does not give two shits about any marginalized groups, because he feels like the people who are doing the oppressing are the ones that are oppressed, right? He is the complete opposite. He is the antithesis to identity politics, right? If Donald Trump is, if you have feminism, Donald Trump is, what is it, minimist? What is it? You know, he's a men's right activist, right? He is intentionally positioning himself to be the exact opposite of anything progressives, liberals, Democrats, people on the left, or people who just don't identify as Republican. He is intentionally positioning himself to be the opposite of it, and masterfully so. So you got someone like Trump, who on one hand is going to just exacerbate the many problems that marginalized communities have, because that's the exact position he has chosen to capitalize on, because of the opportunity that the Republican Party presented, because of all they've done over the last 40 years to create this animosity. That's one side. You got somebody like Hillary Clinton who's going to do the exact opposite at every turning point. Anyone who says anything to critique Hillary Clinton is automatically going to be a sexist. Anyone who says anything to critique the administration is automatically, if they're black, they're going to be racist. You're going to be a racist. If they're going to play identity politics to the point where nothing can get done for a progressive cause, because not only do they use new jokes on us, guys. The joke's on us. Not only do they use identity politics against conservatism, they use identity politics against progressivism, also that they can continue to maintain the economic status quo from which they are greatly benefiting. Which brings me to this article that I was reading. And actually, I want to give, I'm going to go through I want to go through a couple of channels and tell you where I got this from, because it was a great recommendation that I got this morning from one of my followers on Twitter. It was connected to Redacted Tonight with Lee Camp and the comedian who was on that show. I'm sorry, I don't have the comedian's name, but it was a video. It's a video, and I'll share it, I'll retweet it. But it's the video where he's unpacking an article at commondreams.org with Aviva Chomsky, and there was a second article he referenced with Adolph Reed, essentially giving a a web version argument against or exposing identity politics being used by neoliberalism. Exactly what we've been talking about, right? So it started off with a video from Redacted Tonight, and I went to the actual article at commondreams.org. Aviva Chomsky, she's actually Noam Chomsky's daughter. Brilliant piece of writing. And then I went to the actual author, who is Charles Haynes, I believe, of the actual academic piece, where he outlined the case for what's called neoliberal multiculturalism. And he used a South American, a Latin American rather, example of how people in political power were able to weaponize identity politics, and not only weaponize identity politics to suppress dissent, but their entire concept of progress was having representation in the top echelons, economic echelons of their community, of their nation. Right. In other words, we don't need to change the system. We simply need to have a diversity inside of the system. In American language, we would say we don't need to change the top 1%. We don't need to necessarily affect or challenge the economic structure that creates such vast wealth inequality, income inequality. We just need to make sure that we have some good black faces there, some good brown faces there, some good Asian faces there, and the right number of women. So in other words, whatever is representative of America needs to be represented in the top 1%. No, don't challenge the structure. Don't challenge the fundamental problems that this type of system creates. Just make sure that if you're going to have a top 1%, make sure that top 1% looks like America and has the right number of black faces and the right number of LGBTQ faces. Neoliberal multiculturalism. So I reached out to the actual author, and we didn't hear back from him. I want to get him on the show because it's an academic piece. I believe it's the University of Texas at Austin, if I'm not mistaken, is where the professor is from. But I reached out to him because I wanted to bring him on the show to discuss this because of how robust the conversation, how he, not just a robust conversation, but how he broke this down long before we really ran into it in America. He actually wrote this piece in 2005. Now, this is still while the identity politics tool was being weaponized. And again, I want you to understand, I'm not a part of the people who cry out against the regressive left and dismiss all identity politics, because there is absolutely a place and a need and a role for identity politics. And usually the people who say there is no role from the identity politics are people who don't fall on any of those intersections. Right. Let's just be 100% transparent. People who completely dismiss identity politics as something that is totally unnecessary and detrimental to America are people who are neither minority, LGBTQ, or fall on any of those intersections. Now, this does not mean that everyone who claims to be victims of something, that they are always right. And that's the exact problem that we have, is that we live in between these two extremes, where you have one group who is saying it's 100% about identity politics, and anything that is not multicultural is the problem. And if we just get multiculturalism in our top 1%, then America would be fixed and America would be better. And then you have the opposite end of the spectrum who says, screw all identity politics. America is good as it is. And you're either in here. I'm going all over the place to make a point, but here's two intersections. This is an intersection where conservatives meet some progressives. There's an intersection of rejection of identity politics, 100% rejection. That's usually an intersection that you meet libertarians with far left progressives. Now, coming back full circle with the article is talking about the need, I'll get to the article in a second. The need for identity politics is such that there is a problem of multiculturalism and representation in all parts of the American system. However, if you're really going to be intersectional, if you're really going to be multicultural, you cannot leave out the economically disadvantaged. And you cannot leave out conversations about wealth inequality, income inequality, wealth disparity. You can't, because there are more people. The great equalizer, this is what I want to say, the great equalizer in America is poverty. You have poverty, and not just poverty, but the working class, the working poor, the lower middle class, the people who are drowning paycheck to paycheck, and they're literally one check away from being homeless. No matter how much they make, they're trapped in an economic system that is designed to extract as much wealth as it possibly can from every single person in the system that is a laborer, and send it to every person in the system that is a capitalist. This type of problem transcends every identity. And so it would only make sense, wouldn't it, that we include a conversation about class in these conversations about intersectionality. But the article by this professor was brilliant, because he says that is the exact opposite of what's happening. What's happening is that we are using identity for the purposes of suppressing these conversations. And we have a representation and an image of multiculturalism, and we champion and we root. And now I'm paraphrasing, I'm going off and pulling other sources. This is not all from the same author, but we're rooting for these people who look like us, who have the same challenges as us, or people who are LGBTQ like us, or people who are women like us. We champion them to get to the higher echelons of our economic strata, not realizing that their success does not translate into our success. Their victories do not translate into our victories. Quite the contrary, their victories actually marginalize our challenges. Because so long as it gives the impression of multiculturalism, then there is no need to unpack the real fundamental problems that exist in our economic system that continues to further the problems of wealth inequality and poverty in the richest nation in the world. So long as there's a blackface on it, everything's okay. So long as we have the right number of LGBTQ people in Wall Street, then everything's okay. So long as we have the right number of women represented as a percentage of the number of women in America proportionately, then everything's okay. Never mind the fact that all of that multiculturalism simply puts a smiling face on a corrupt system that is hurting the very people for which they claim to represent and for which they claim to speak. But they would never allow their conversations to go over into the conversations about class, because that is the holy grail of neoliberalism. Because without class, without or with exploring the problems of class, then you might accidentally have to raise their tax, like what, 10%. And here we are. So this is the concept. I'm going to reach out to the author, or I've already reached out to him. I want to bring him on so he can speak. He'll probably speak from an academic perspective, and when he gets off the air, I'll do the political spin, because that's what I do. But from the academic perspective, it is actually something quantifiable, where you can see the number of faces that are represented in an economic paradigm. The number of different cultures and the number of different identities that are represented in an economic paradigm actually have the adverse effect of marginalizing those same voices, those same faces, and those same identities. And so while we're championing multiculturalism because, the CEO or the board, the chairman of the board of, X corporation is black, we've actually championed that to the detriment of the conversation about the effects that that company and their practices inside of this broader globalized economy has on black people. Yep. All right. So that's where we are. All right. I'm going to take a pause here and take a second to thank our most recent patrons. I want to thank everyone who has joined the Progressive Army and helping us do what we do. We cannot do it without you. I want to thank, quite a few people over the weekend. Kate, thank you so much for becoming a patron. We appreciate every penny that's ever given. Grant, thank you so much for becoming a patron. We cannot do this without you. Philip, thank you so much for becoming a patron. And I also want to thank one last one who joined over the weekend. Let's see. Where are you? One day I'll have a list in front of me. Ivan. Thank you so much for becoming a patron. You can support the Benjamin Dixon Show. Listen, we crossed over 10,000 subscribers last week. So thank you guys so much. We're already at 10,300. So it's moving at a much faster pace. Thank you to everyone on Spreaker. We'll be at 10,000 before the end of the night, probably. So thank you for everyone who's over there. Everyone who's now listening live via iHeartRadio. We're getting a lot of traffic from iHeartRadio, so thanks so much for joining us and listening there. Be sure to share something. If you like what you hear, be sure to share, be sure to subscribe. And if you really like what you hear, I want you to go to www.patreon.com/the BPD show and become a patron. All right, let's do this. I want to, okay, great. Thanks for that information there. I think this may be. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, guys. Just reading a note here. Great. Okay. All right, folks, 857-600-0518. You can join the conversation on anything that we've discussed tonight. Sorry, I had a note there. Someone sent me a note in the chat room, and I want to include you in the conversation. So make sure that you pick up the phone or send me a tweet at the BPD show. Or you can put a chat in the chat room on YouTube or the chat in the chat room on Spreaker and join the conversation that way. Let's go to Twitter and see some of the feedback. There's some questions there. Stand with Barney. What do you? Okay, so here's the thing with Barney Frank. Good question. With Barney Frank, it is a tactic that it's quite honestly a tactic. And going back to the conversation about how they've used neoliberal multiculturalism is the new word for it, right? That's what I'm going to use from now on. They've used neoliberal multiculturalism as a means of suppressing the conversation. It was an attack that we simply, progressives, were not prepared for. We were not prepared to fight back against this because we didn't fully understand. And if you remember the conversation from Professor Eddie Glaude, he was saying that it's the responsibility of academics to give us the necessary language so that we can communicate to galvanize a movement, but also fight back against strategies that are being employed against us. And so we as progressives simply were not prepared for this onslaught, for them to turn the weaponized identity politics against their own. We've seen them do it to greater or lesser extent, and sometimes rightfully so, against a rabidly racist at times Republican Party who from time to time just full-blown, full-throated, unapologetic, racist, homophobic, xenophobic, every other phobia. You've seen them actually use it and wield it against, and when I say them, you've seen the Democrats use it against conservatives, but for some reason, progressives did not expect this to be turned inward to suppress the progressive movement. And with Barney Frank, this is just like the crown jewel of it, right? You have people actually whitewashing Bernie Sanders, the fact that he's Jewish. You have people whitewashing that for the purposes of executing their brilliantly pieced together neoliberal multiculturalism and weaponized identity politics. Because it's not effective if you're trying to use it on people who are in that demographic, which is why you see them constantly, painstakingly, over and over again, contorting themselves into positions so that they can whitewash black and brown women, people of color, LGBTQ, anyone who does not fit or anyone that goes against their strategy. They completely ignore you, whitewash you, so they can forward this narrative that has been used as a weapon against progressivism. And progressives were not sufficiently prepared for it, which is why we must absolutely understand this. Some of the same tactics that they will use over the next few years against conservatism, realize that it will be used against progressives as a means of silencing debate. And if we're not prepared for it, then we can become the victims of it, just like we did in this election cycle. All right, let's take this caller. Caller, you're live on the air. What's your name, comment, and or question?
Is it me?
That's you. You are live on the air, my friend. What's your name?
Hey, Ben. It's Jay Brown.
Hey, how's it going, Jay? What's on your mind?
Do you think it was a mistake for Bernie to run within the Democratic Party? And do you think is there an argument to convince people, other progressives, if this attack of neoliberalism is true, then should we get out of the Democratic Party and not get sucked into this? Or I guess, what are your thoughts on that?
That's actually a very good question. Thanks so much for that question. So here's the problem, Jay. The problem, and let me take this one off air so I can get these next few calls. The problem is that there is, yeah, not that. There is no panacea. There is no party that has this right. And let me explain what I mean. Yesterday, my sister Anoa, she did a show with the presidential candidate from the Green Party, an African-American woman who quite honestly, I don't know if anyone knew that there were other candidates besides Jill Stein. And it spoke volumes to the same, and this is what Noah and in the conversation yesterday, this is exactly the same sense of inevitability that we see with Hillary Clinton in the Democratic Party being used in the Green Party. And so I only bring that up because a lot of people feel as though the Green Party is the great savior of American politics, when in actuality, they suffer from the same exact problems as any other political party. Now, to answer your question more directly, you said, do I feel that Bernie Sanders made a mistake by running in the Democratic Party? No, I think he made a mistake of running in the Democratic Party like he was a Democrat, or like he could win the same way every other Democratic won. I think if he ran the entire campaign as a guerrilla-styled Democrat, as a person going after a brand new coalition, as a person building a brand new coalition versus trying to win over the previous coalition, then he probably would have won. If I think that was his only mistake. I think that he tried to win over an existing coalition that was forged in the fires of neoliberalism. In terms of what do you do in the future, some difficult times ahead, in my opinion. I think there's some difficult decisions that people are going to have to make coming up. Whether their decision is to vote for Trump, whether the decision is to vote for Clinton, whether the decision is to stay at home, write in Bernie, write in to support Jill Stein. There's a lot of difficult decisions that are going to probably cause a lot of progressives to become disillusioned. And the question is, how long will you stay disillusioned? And how long will it take for you to get back up and to start organizing now? That's the question. And that's the because I think that's the only quite literally the only way that we will be able to keep. And here's the thing. I think people, there are progressives left in the Democratic Party. Let me start there. There are progressives left in the Democratic Party who have found themselves having to acquiesce to the power structure that surrounds them or be marginalized, right? And so the question is, what are they going to do? And where are they? And do we need to, can we find them, or do we replace them? Do we need to, if they are not willing to stand up and fight for their values, then what good are they to the progressive movement? And so the only way any progress will be made is if we start organizing now for the purposes of future elections for the sake of progressivism, because it is right and proper in an environment that has rabidly conservative ideologies being expressed on a national level. It is only right and proper to have progressive values expressed on a national level. And do you realize that for many years, we never had conversations about wealth disparity, income inequality? Up until about 2010, there was not a single conversation of any substance on a national level about what we are discussing now. And all we had in front of us was either the rabid right or the neoliberal center, without any balance from, and I'm speaking on in terms of economic policies, clearly, but without that balance, we grew up in a generation where we didn't know the difference. And we had a lot of people grow up into this where they don't believe that there's actually any other paradigm that we could even consider in America, because the window of discussion and discourse was pushed so narrow into the confines of what Republicans accepted and what third-way Democrats accepted that we completely left off an entire end of the spectrum. And it's only fitting and proper that progressive voices are represented on a national level. And the only question is, who's going to do the representation? Who's going to get out there and fight for it? All right, folks, we're coming down to the last minute. Join the conversation over the week. I want you to be here tomorrow night for a special broadcast of the Benjamin Dixon Show. Wednesday night, I should be broadcasting live from, where am I going to be? Florida. I'm going to be in Florida for a couple of days celebrating a wedding. I want to thank the Progressive Army in general. Noah Changa and Nick Nolan in specific, David Grossman, JP Rankin, all the rest of you guys who really stepped in and helped me out over the past weekend. And when I had to go to Ohio to bury my aunt, who was she made it to 81 years old. And, it was still unexpected and I had to drive over to Ohio at the last minute because, like I said, it kind of happened and the funeral came really quickly. So I didn't have time to, anyway, I had to take the week off, the weeknight off, and I'm thankful to the team who was able to jump in there 2 hours before showtime. I realized that I'm not going to be able to do the show and drive 8 hours the next day. So I just put out a call to Noah and Nick and David, and they made sure that we had a show the other night on Thursday night. So I want to thank you guys. Thank you so much for your support and for all your well wishes and kind thoughts and words. So anyway, I really appreciate you guys. We can't do this without you. Sir, I tell you what, let me be thorough here. We had a caller on hold. Caller, you're the last caller of the night. Be sure to turn down your volume and tell me your name, comment, and or question. This is you. You're live on the air. What's your name? Okay, you're busy listening. Sorry. You're busy listening to the radio. So anyway, see you guys tomorrow night. See you the night after that. This is the Benjamin Dixon Show, and I will see you next time. Talk to you later.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. It's Ben Dixon! If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixon